The concept that I want to talk about is an inner world tool for creating a high-performance environment. It comes from one of my mentors and my business coach, Vac Ubel. It's built around this underlying concept that I came across in Ryan Holiday's book, which is the obstacle is the way. It's an interesting turn of phrase, the obstacle is the way, because it is in itself a bit of a paradox, right? An obstacle is typically seen as something that's in our way. How could the obstacle be the way? In this book, Ryan talks about a number of incredible world leaders. One of them is a man by the name of Marcus Aurelius, who is one of the more well-known Roman emperors. And he said, in writing in his personal diary about 1900 years ago, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. And I think that's an incredibly powerful concept, but if it remains merely a paradox, it remains useless for us in the real world. So I want to take you through a conversation that makes this practical. And I want to start with a very generalized concept of the human brain. We've all kind of grown up with this idea that there's the left-hand side of our brain and the right-hand side of the brain, and the left-hand side of the brain deals with things like logic, and the right-hand side of the brain deals with things like creativity. So let's just go a step further. Think of the logical left-hand side of your brain very much like a filing cabinet. It's dealing with what exists. It's dealing with what's known. So we open the filing cabinet when we get in the car to drive. And it's like, okay, I know how to drive. I have a file. Out it comes, pulls out the file. There's the file on how to drive. I know how to do that. The left-hand side deals with scarce resources. It's also very associated to the limbic or the primal part of our brain, the brain that is designed to keep us safe. And so dealing with scarce resources where there's not enough food and there's not enough shelter, these are important concepts for us to deal with back then. It also specializes in arguing for its limitations because its prime directive is survival. It's not a good idea to go walking out on thin ice. It's not a good idea to go and try and crash tackle that saber-toothed tiger. There are some concepts that it's trying to deal with to protect us and to keep us in our comfort zone, to keep us fundamentally safe. The right-hand side of the brain is different. It's the creative side of our brain. It deals with the unknown. It is by its very nature resourceful, and instead of arguing for its limits, it questions limits. It's focused around not trying to keep us where we're at, but rather around expansion. And while the left-hand side of our brain is about managing safety, the right-hand side of our brain is about managing risk. The key idea here is that everything that you can see around us, other than flora and fauna, has been created through the right-hand side of the brain thinking. Everything from the first fireplaces that we built as cavemen and nomadic wanderers, all the way through to agriculture and animal husbandry, all the way through to the use of metal and metallurgy, all the way through to advanced mechanization, technology, the internet, satellites, the mobile phone in your pocket, and the tools that make this very nice, fine tablecloth. All of this has been created through the right-hand side of the brain. If you have a look at that list, can you see that there's a little bit of a conflict of interest going on there, right? There's a conflict going on in our brain between trying to keep us safe and where we're at and trying to help us grow and expand. And we often come across this conflict. And I want to explain it a little bit. And I want to explain it by the use of a story. Because the left-hand side of the brain is also a specialist in truth. Because it's dealing with what it knows, it is a master at understanding what's true. By way of example, does anyone know who that guy is? Howard? His name is Roger Bannister, right? Up until 1956, it was true. Science had demonstrated that it was not possible for a human being to run a mile in less than 4 minutes. Wasn't possible. In the minds of all of the experts, of all the people that mattered, it wasn't even a question. They'd done tests. Our lungs couldn't handle it. Our ligaments couldn't handle it. The human frame was simply not built for those sorts of speeds. That said, there was a group of people that were doing everything they could to try and break this barrier. For at least 50 years, it had been a stated, conscious goal of generations of runners, and yet no one could get close. The closest was about 4 minutes 10. And then in 1956, Roger Bannister came along, and yes, indeed, he broke the 4-minute mile. Now, what's interesting about that, does anybody know how he broke the 4-minute mile? Was that someone say he ran really fast? Yeah, he did, right? But a lot of people might think he just ran harder and faster than most, right? It actually wasn't true. He was an academic by nature. He was inquisitive. But he also understood this concept of pacing. It's something that all of you guys are doing in KPI. The way that runners learn how to run, and certainly learn how to progress, is they run just behind in the slipstream of someone that can run a little bit faster and a little bit better than them. And so they're almost pulled along energetically. Now, pacing didn't make sense to run the 4-minute mile in less than 4 minutes because no one had ever done it. There was no one that could pace at that speed. However, there were plenty of people that could pace at the speed of 59 seconds for a quarter mile. So he got 4 people together. Each of those 4 people was a specialist and measured themselves to get on pace to run a 59-second quarter. And he just fell into line behind them. One would exhaust themselves after 59 seconds and peel off, and the next one would slide in. And it was this team effort that actually allowed him to pace himself up and across the 4-minute mile, which was an incredibly interesting concept for everybody here at KPI, because the beauty is that we're surrounded by people that are doing extraordinary things, and we're also surrounded by people that are just starting out through the process. So if you're just starting out, hitch yourself to someone in this room this evening or out there in the community that's done the things that you're trying to do before, and pace yourself in behind them. So what's interesting, some of you may not have known the story about pacing, but most of you would have heard the story about him breaking the 4-minute mile. Why is it that that story is so popular? Why is it that that story is so interesting? Is it like, if you think back to the left-hand side of the brain, we've got, science knowing that it wasn't possible. And yet, what happened? Right? He did it anyway. So it turns out that while all of the science and everything that was known by humans throughout that entire history, right, it turns out that that wasn't the barrier. It wasn't a physical barrier. What was it? It was a mental barrier. And the moment this photo was taken, as Roger Bannister crossed that line, the truth changed. This is an interesting idea to get your head around. When you actually connect with how many times throughout history truth has radically changed. Right? The world was once flat, right? And it wasn't possible for Christopher Columbus to get around to the New World. When Kennedy said that in 10 years' time we were going to put a man on the moon, all of his interior advisors on science and technology and all of the world's global advisors told him it couldn't be done. Right? We didn't have the technology. We didn't even have some of the industries that were going to be required to produce the things that were going to be necessary to even make that possible. And yet, he said we embark upon these things not because they are easy, but because they are hard. And it was because of that intention and that understanding, the truth as it was could change, that 10 years later, 9.5 years later, we did actually have a man on the moon. And I think that's an incredible thing to understand when we look at the great leaders in the world is that very few of them accept the current truth. And so one of the things that I want you to be thinking about this evening, or if you're listening to this presentation at another time, is what's true for you? Right? What is the stuff going on in your world right now that's true? And from the perspective of the obstacle as the way, what are some of the truths that you're dealing with at the moment that are slowing you down, tripping you up, that are creating the obstacle? Because it may just be possible that that truth could also change. So we've got this line, this mental barrier that we need to cross. And the purpose of this evening's presentation is to provide you with some leverage, to provide you with a tool for actually crossing that mental barrier. And here's what I'd like you to do. I would like you to think of a time in your life where you achieved a particular success, an achievement, or a victory. It could be last week, last month, last decade. I don't care where it was, but it needs to be a victory, a success, or an achievement, something that you are personally proud of. Have a think. Got it? Got it? Got it? Got it? Everyone got it? Great. Now, in a room of this size, is it possible that any of you are going to have the same victory in mind? Right? That's not possible. The only thing that could possibly vary is the degree, right, in which that may be a victory or a success or an achievement. And yet, there is one law, a fundamental principle that is deeper than truth that I can say with certainty exists as a result of you achieving that victory, that success, or that achievement. And it's a law that becomes quite profound when we get our mind around it. Think of that victory. Would it be fair to say that for you to achieve that, some degree of discomfort was required? We have laughs, we have chuckles, we have people breaking out in smiles. This is the typical response as we go back and as we remember the struggle. If you have something to write down, or if you have a phone with a camera that you would like to take, pause. My victory, which is why this slide is up here, is when I first came to Australia, I was told that it was not possible to achieve what's on that photo. All of the industry insiders told me that my goal of putting 500 people in a room couldn't be done. I certainly couldn't charge for it. I certainly couldn't do it in January. People wouldn't show up. People wouldn't pay. They told me that it'd be over before it even started for me. I had this little voice in my soul that didn't agree with them. And as a result, that's the photo of my victory. For the preceding 3 months, it felt like I had an industrial vice slowly crushing my chest, lungs, and heart. Can anyone relate to that feeling? Yes. If you can't relate to that feeling, may I encourage you to find something that has the potential of making you feel like that. It's an extraordinary tool for growth. Coming back to where I was going with this, 3 words that you may want to take a photo of is discomfort precedes victory. Would you agree? So we all agree that before every success, every victory, or every achievement has been preceded by discomfort. And because this is a universal law, it becomes possible to therefore infer that more discomfort must mean more victory. It's rudimentary logic. Now, am I saying that if you go out and you get more uncomfortable, that is going to guarantee that you will succeed every time? No, I'm not trying to say that, because you don't have full awareness. You don't have all the facts, right? Human beings are still going to err. But if you stay comfortable, if you avoid discomfort, which frankly society is kind of engineered to suggest we should be looking for the comfortable life. We should be looking to take the comfortable options in life to try and keep us in our comfort zone. Now, by the way, we've all heard these concepts of being in our comfort zone. because the comfort zone is designed to protect us from shit happening. Now, for those of you that have had experience with your comfort zone over your life, does staying comfortable actually stop shit happening? No, shit still has a way of getting in. So, while more discomfort cannot guarantee victory, success, or achievement, is it possible to achieve victory, success, or achievement without discomfort? It's not. All right? Think of a victory, a success, or an achievement, something that you are personally proud of where discomfort was not required. I want an example. Because if someone just hands you $1 million, there's no victory there, there's no success, there's no achievement.
I'm sorry to say this.
Please stand up. Who are you? What do you do? Wait a minute.
Hang on, who are you? What do you do?
Have I ever struck anybody as the sort of person that minds being disagreed with? This is what this is about.
Okay.
Talk to me.
So, one of my books...
Do you have another mic?
Yeah. One of my books has sold 500,000 copies in Germany. I've never been to Germany. Wow. I've never tried to sell a copy of a book in Germany, and that really is something that came without any discomfort.
So writing the book, no discomfort?
Yeah. Okay, I did write the book. I did write the book.
Was there any discomfort in producing the book?
Not that particular. I mean, it took a long time, but I wouldn't have called it discomfort. It was hard work. Is that what you're saying? Is this hard work?
Same shit, different name. Yeah. Right? So, but for you selling 500,000 books in Germany, which is awesome, right? But for you going through the original discomfort, hard work, challenge, whatever you want to call it, of producing that book in the first place, it couldn't possibly have happened. Any victory, any success, any achievement by its pure definition means that discomfort or challenge was required, because it is in that we find the feelings of achievement, success, and victory. So, today, perhaps, tomorrow, likely, within the next week, for sure, within the next year, a lot. You are going to be presented with uncomfortable opportunities. You're going to be presented with moments where you have the choice to either take a comfortable option or an uncomfortable option. Now, by the way, I'm not in any way suggesting that we should spend the rest of our lives in perpetual discomfort. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying, if you're sitting on a beach in Thailand, relaxing, drinking pina coladas or mai tais or margaritas or whatever your beach cocktail of choice is, and you get a phone call from your GM or one of your team, and something's going down, the comfortable option could be to ignore it, to push it aside, or to hope that it'll resolve itself. The uncomfortable option would just spend an extra 10, 15, 20 minutes, however long it takes, to actually solve the problem there and then. All I'm saying is that in that moment, to cross the mental barrier, if you want to experience more success in your life, the tool is to take the uncomfortable option when it presents itself. And so I want to continue with a conversation we often have with ourselves that tricks us into taking the comfortable option. There's a little chart that I'm going to go through here. The one that's here, that's up on the screen, hasn't been edited properly yet. So there's spelling mistakes, a few little tweaks that need to be made and such. But on the left-hand side, we have a situation that happens, right? Some sort of undesirable circumstance, some kind of wrong action that you've taken, or some kind of limiting belief that you have. Some sort of phenomena occurs. We usually call it shit happening, right? Something along those lines. In that moment, we have two options. We can be congruent with self, or we can be incongruent with self. So let's say the undesirable circumstance, by way of an example, is businesses running out of money. That's the fact, right? There's no good, no bad, but thinking make it so. And so that's the reality that we're dealing with. Once we become consciously aware that, business is running out of money, we have our two options. We can either be congruent with self or incongruent with self, because we all have a self-awareness, right? And in this case, the self-awareness is telling us, the congruent self-awareness is telling us, I need to make more sales calls. That's what our truth is telling us. We can choose to be congruent with self and make more sales calls, or we can be incongruent with self and not. It's binary. Congruence, by the way, is the most powerful position for a human being. My mentor, Vac, explains it like this. Congruent, incongruent. Congruent, incongruent. And so there's this concept of being in alignment, in equal to self and other, and in accordance with. It's the most powerful position. And yet often we find ourselves being incongruent with self. We now see over here, if we're being incongruent with self, I'm not making sales calls, the thing that I know I should be doing, but I'm not. If I become aware of a personal incongruence like this, if I become conscious of it, I will experience something called chatter. Now, you've all heard that voice in the back of your head, yeah? That self-talk. That's not what I'm talking about, because the voice in the back of your head can be very useful. It can tell you what you're going to buy from the shops from the dinner party on the weekend. It can think about the type of strategy that you're going to approach your sales conversations with. Like, this inner voice is not in itself a bad thing. I'm also not even talking necessarily about negative self-talk, like past regret or any of these sorts of things, right? Specifically, chatter refers to the type of self-talk that occurs as a direct result of you having an awareness of a personal incongruence. And from that moment of awareness, we're on the hook. We know we're not living in accordance with our values. And generally, we have this feeling of not being able to live with ourselves. This chatter going through our mind is driving us crazy. So we have two options. We have two directions of thinking. We have high-performance thinking, or we have low-performance thinking. I'm first going to track the low-performance thinking that occurs as a result of chatter. But before I do, I want you to see if you can think of any chatter that you've got going on that's a result of you being incongruent with self. You'll know it's there. You get up in the morning and it's going at you. Chatter, 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 chatter. Like a broken record. Doesn't shut up. Chatter, chatter, chatter. It's you know what you should be saying or doing, but you're not. Chatter, chatter, chatter. I'm not going to put you on the spot just now, but who's got some? No, show of hands. All right, so we've all got chatter to one degree or another. So with that chatter in mind, continue the rest of this presentation from that perspective. Because once we become aware of chatter, often we'll come up with a rationalizer. Now, when I say the word rationalizer, what do you hear? What's some of the words that make up that word? What does it imply? So the word came up, excuse, right? Why is the word rationalizer different than excuse? Because it becomes very easy to spot an excuse, right? The challenge and the reason that these are significantly more insidious is because there's an element of truth to them. There's an element of logic to them. Rationalizers exploit that element of truth to create a distraction from reality. And so this rolls back to this conversation around truth. If we define rationalizer, it's one that invents a rational explanation for or to justify one's actions, especially discreditable actions or beliefs, with plausible reasons, especially after the event. To indulge, often unchallenged. We're going to come back to that. In excuses for or explanations of behaviour about which one feels guilty or uncomfortable. So the business is running out of money is the is. It's just reality. Business is bad because of the economy is what gets us off the hook from having to be congruent with self and make sales calls. Because it's now not our problem. It's the economy's problem. Who's heard someone say the words, business is bad because of the economy, or words to that effect, right? Now, is that true? Right? At any given point in time, half of the Fortune 500 companies, and it's the same with the ASX, were founded in a recession or a depression. Half. Right? The economy is irrelevant as to the performance of business. For me, when I just finished these last round of brand Accelerator campaigns, there were 49 messages on my phone. I was unlistened to. I hadn't even gone there. I'd wake up every morning and this little chatter in my brain would say, I don't see freaking messages. There could be something important on there. But I told myself they'd be out of date by now anyway. An element of truth in there that got me off the hook from just staying there for 5 minutes and listening to them. Another rationalizer may have been, I'm too busy or too self-important. Whatever it is, it's hiding the truth. The shit happening could be, I'm overweight. That could be the uncomfortable reality. And the rationalizer could be sophisticated and empowering, like, I'm too busy making sales calls and building a successful business. So we can create incredibly high-tech rationalizers that still get us off the hook and hide us from the truth. Rationalizers justify inactivity. That is all they do. They provide logic and an element of truth to be able to get us off the hook for doing something that we feel uncomfortable about doing. So tying it back to the opening slide, therefore rationalizing and high performance cannot coexist. Because high performance and inactivity, high performance and not dealing with reality cannot coexist. The fastest way to improve your personal performance and the performance of your team is to create a rationalisation-free zone where you know what a rationaliser sounds like, your team knows what a rationaliser sounds like, your partner and kids know what a rationaliser sounds like, and you bring that to each other's attention as often as possible. Because a rationaliser, by definition, obscures reality, and they are often unchallenged. When this person tells you that business is bad because of the economy, they're saying that over and over again because no one has told them that that is not, in fact, true. No one has introduced them to another perspective to give them a glimpse of reality, and so they stay stuck in the rationalizer. So if we zoom out a little bit, you'll see the direction of this negative thinking or this unproductive thinking drives us down here to a final conclusion where we recognize that this behavior is apparently successful. Because we don't want to make uncomfortable sales calls. If we're able to justify that the business is bad from the economy, we don't have to take that uncomfortable action, and that in the short term, certainly by our left-hand side of the limbic brain, thinks that that is a great deal. So it appears to be successful. However, because it appears to be successful, history repeats. And it turns out more shit continues to happen, more rationalizers continue to get used, and we get further and further away from reality and therefore further and further away from high performance. There is another direction of thinking. If we go back to the moment back here, where we have that awareness of a personal incongruence, where we have that moment of awareness of this chatter, there's a different direction that we can take. But it does require that self-awareness. So the moment that you become aware that you have chatter, the question you need to ask yourself is, what do I need to say or do about this? Simple. What do I need to say or do? Of course, with courtesy, manners, respect, and understanding. So I'd like to open this up to the group. I'd like to make this less of just an intellectual exercise, and I'd like to make it experiential for someone that is brave enough to share something with which they've got chatter.
What are you going to do with
You're going to have a chat. I'm really disappointed. Thank you. Please give Ingrid a big round of applause. Ingrid, did you spot the irony of all of that?
Yeah.
There was a whole bunch of people that put their hand up with chatter.
Yeah.
We're having a whole conversation about taking the uncomfortable option, and you did it.
Yeah, high five.
High five.
I need to be shifted.
All right, good. Chatter. What's the chatter? Well, actually, what's the thing that's happened? What's the shit happening?
I think I had a good idea, and I see other people with a similar idea, and I go, so you're not really.
Great.
So my chatter is.
So what's the chatter?
So chatter is. So my chatter is I'm behind the eight ball. I'm not fast enough to be in front.
Great. So you've got this self-talk going on, right? Now, what we want to drill into, and so it's a situation where other people are doing stuff that really should be you.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the is. Not good, not bad, just is. Right. So you've got chatter going, right? Now, it's something you're doing, not doing.
Yeah.
And there's this rationalisation that you have within which there's an element of truth that you're using to get yourself off the hook of actually going and doing the stuff that you know you need to do. What is it?
I'm busy doing other stuff.
I'm busy doing other stuff. Now, I've got a book to write, I've got this to do, I've got that to do, I've got all this kind of stuff to do, right? Now, here's the trick. Is that true?
Totally.
It's absolutely, totally true, right? And this is the danger and the insidiousness of the rationaliser, is because all of that is true, we take it as the whole truth and nothing but the truth. And so it holds, right? And it holds us in inaction. Okay, so, and it will remain that way unless challenged and unless we choose to move the rationaliser aside and inspect not just the truth, but the reality. So, what's the reality if we push all this stuff around? And there will be no pithy answer, but talk to me about what's the truth? What's really going on?
I'm smart enough to be in that space.
You're smart enough to be in that space. What else? So you've got all the skills and expertise.
Skills and expertise.
Knowledge.
Knowledge.
The stuff that they're producing isn't better than the stuff you're producing.
Totally.
Great. Are you scared?
Maybe a little.
Great. So is that reality? Great. So we've got to deal with our emotions as part of reality as well. Right? What else is going on? Other than you being busy, we've got to explore if there's other rationalisers holding this in place. Because if it's something big, you may have more than one. Is there anything else that's stopping you from doing it? The reason that you're giving yourself other than being busy?
Am I not uncomfortable enough?
You're not uncomfortable enough? Is it anything around not good enough? Or are you totally sold on good enough?
I'm still not good enough.
I think I'm sold on good enough. Fear of rejection from the market?
Oh, totally.
So what's the rationaliser? Right? The market might hate it.
Yeah.
Or ridicule me or point their finger at me.
Because there's lots of other people doing it that the market likes. And the market
It's you. Now, is there an element of truth in that? Damn right there is. Right? In fact, I have got to the point in KPI where I can't make a single decision about something that doesn't piss someone off. Someone's pissed off, right? So my experience has been, and I was told this by mentors beforehand, that when you're out there actually doing something important in the world, it's going to piss people off. Because if it wasn't important, you wouldn't be changing anything. If you're changing something, you're fundamentally moving people out of the comfort zone because it's right brain thinking. People don't like to be moved out of their comfort zone, so you are, by definition of being more successful, going to piss some people off.
Yeah.
Now, is this getting us closer to the reality?
So the people you're talking about, people you care about, or people you don't care about?
Doesn't matter. Right? Point is, people are going to be pissed off.
Yeah.
Now, so one rationalizer is I'm busy. The other rationalizer is people won't like it, or some people might not like me.
Yeah.
Right? Anything else?
So where does the whole I can't cope with the technology, I've got too much to do, where does that fit in?
Well, do you have a thing going, technology is in the way? The reason I'm not doing this is because I don't understand and don't know how to deal with technology.
Part of that is I understand it, but it's taking too much time. It's too hard.
Great. So it takes me too much time to do all the functional stuff to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Great. What's the reality? Can anyone else relate to any of this, by the way? Okay. So everyone's like in it. Okay. So let's just take this one example, right, of I'm being held back as a result of me not knowing, understanding enough about, and technology taking up too much time. Let's move to an underlying reality here. What's the reality that's not being dealt with?
You've got to figure it out.
She's got to figure it out. Is that true?
Yeah. No, somebody else can get it.
Somebody else to do it. Right? So, okay. So then suddenly, the moment we sit there and we go, let's actually move away from our rationalizer and let's inspect reality for options, options become available to us. We could either decide to bite the bullet and get better at it, or we can delegate. On a scale of 0 to 10, how good are you at delegating? 10 is amazing.
9.
So you're very good at delegating.
If I'm confident with it.
Great. Okay. I love Branson, right? Because Branson doesn't touch a computer. He has his notepad and a PA that does everything. Now, granted, he's Branson, but he wasn't always Branson. But he always started delegating. Like, his behaviour now is a fractal of his behaviour then, right? So, we've unpacked just very quickly, we've moved aside a few of these rationalisers that have allowed us to deal with reality, right? The reality is you could easily delegate that stuff. The reality is the market's going to be pissed off one way or another. You just need to make sure you've got slightly more people that like you than don't, right? All of the greatest human beings in society that we revere and admire started off with far more people hating them than liking them. Right? So I'm assuming that we're not trying to end apartheid or something crazy like that. Right? So then the question comes down to this. You know you better than anybody else. Right? You've moved your rationalisers aside. You've had a bit of a look at reality. What do you need to say or do with courtesy, manners, respect and understanding?
Just need to get on with it.
Just getting to get on with it. That is too vague and nebulous to be effective enough to shut down chatter. What do you need to say or do?
I need to find somebody to do the stuff that I can't do.
You need to find, what is the stuff that you can't do? The technology stuff, right? So maybe you could do that, I don't know, freaking here, right? Or you could jump on like an Elance or an Odesk or a Freelancer. So literally, right, this is going to go tonight until about 10, right? Is there anything stopping you from going home, jumping on Elance or Odesk and going, I'm not going to go to sleep until I've put together a brief and put out a thing? Nothing stopping you from doing that. If you did that, right, would you wake up in the morning with chatter?
But some of the other chatter, not that chatter.
That chatter would be shut down.
Yeah.
You haven't solved the problem yet,
But you're on to it.
on your way.
but you're acting. You're taking action, right? Your brain doesn't hate you for not having got the result yet. It hates you for you hating you and being incongruent with self and not listening to yourself. Because if you continue to not listen to yourself for long enough, right? If you came to me, right, and you asked me some advice, no, let's do this the other way around. If I came to you and I asked you some advice, and you took half an hour, and you gave me some great advice, and I went out and did nothing with it, and then I came back again and I asked for some more advice, and you took pity on me and you gave me some time and energy, and then I went out and did nothing with it. And then I came back to you again and again and again. Like eventually I get the, nah, piss off, not interested. What's happened over that period of time to your level of esteem for me? It's dropped. So I want you to recognize that when you don't do what you know you should do, your esteem for yourself will drop. Your self-esteem will drop. The only thing that causes a destruction of self-esteem is being incongruent with self. The only way to create an acceleration of self-esteem is to be congruent with self. And all you need to do to be congruent with self is take the littlest baby steps to shut down your chatter based on answering the question, what do I need to say or do?
You make it sound so simple. And it is. Baby steps.
So, I made it sound so simple.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, is addressing your chatter a comfortable option? No. You see, chatter is an actual experience of the left and right-hand side of the brain coming together in conflict. We started the presentation with a conversation where you could recognize that these two sides of the brain were at odds. The moment you start to experience an incongruence with self, it shows that you've found a resistance point of your comfort zone. And you start to rationalize and take in action because you don't want to cross that comfort zone. So when I give you a tool to be able to recognize where you found your resistance point, when I provide you with a tool where you can recognize the symptom of that, which is chatter, always, if you're not doing what you know you should do to cross it, what should you do? Take the uncomfortable option. If it means you stay up till 2 a.m. in the morning, you will survive. Right? If it means you listen to your chatter and have a notebook and write it all down and then ask yourself the question, what is the reality here? Right? Is what I'm thinking true? Question yourself. Entrepreneurs tend to ask more questions than other people because they understand that they don't have all the answers. So ask yourself the question, why am I thinking what I'm thinking? Right? Is this true? The premises that I'm building this argument for, are they even true? And then when you ask yourself the question, what do I need to say or do to shut down this chatter? You will be presented in that moment always with an uncomfortable option. It's never going to give you an easy one, otherwise you wouldn't be avoiding it in the first place and therefore you wouldn't have chatter. So if you want to achieve more victory, more success, or more achievement in your life, take the uncomfortable option. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.